In this video, I will teach you how to find the best move in any chess position and also how to come up with a middle game plan. So we are currently here in this position. Please start thinking, what move would you play as black? It is black to move. So how can we find the best moves? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to make a list of candidate moves. Those are just possibilities we are considering. They call that candidate moves in chess. So how do we make this list? There are many strategies you can use. I will just explain how I do it. The first thing I always do is I use the CCT strategy. Checks, captures, threats. We always need to consider those three options because if they are in the position, oftentimes they are the strongest moves or they are the moves that can lead to tactics. So every check, capture and threat we have to keep in mind. After that, we are going to do a pawn structure check. And after that, we are going to do a piece optimization check. So those are my three plans. First, CCT. So what do I think about in this position? CCT, checks. I don't have checks. Captures, this. This is one capture we have. Threats. A threat means immediately attacking a piece where you are threatening to win material, threatening to do a checkmate, threatening to do a fork, attacking something that is unprotected. Something like that is a threat. So this is a threat. And queen b6 is a threat because we are attacking this pawn. So those three moves are, in my opinion, what you could think about just based off the CCT system. Since we already have three candidate moves in our list, what I will usually do is I will already start calculating them. If you are playing over the board, you have more time. So you can probably already think, okay, these are three moves. I am going to add some more based on pawn structure and based on piece optimization. But here I think, since most of you are playing rapid games online, myself included, we don't want to make our list too big either because we are just going to have to waste too much time, and probably the best move is already within our CCT if you find three moves that are in your CCT check. H6, if they move back the bishop, I don't really see a benefit from this move except that we weakened our structure. Because every single change we make that is not this basic setup is always going to be a weakness. They can take our knight, which would be good for us. We would be able to recapture, basically free up the bishop a little bit, develop this knight, get rid of their bishop. But if you have a good opponent, they are not just going to capture this, they will move back. And I am not the type of player, first of all, to play this because, of course, you are always somewhat putting yourself in danger, and they could of course also still move back. So h6, it is a candidate move, but I am going to eliminate it. I'm not going to play this. Queen b6, although it looks great at first sight, it doesn't really do much because they can easily defend it with queen c2 or queen e2. Both of those are possible. Let's just say queen c2. They are attacking this, they are protecting this, and our queen is not doing anything, and she is also blocking the pawn push and blocking the knight from developing. So doesn't look like a great move to me. Capturing this is very forcing, very easy to calculate. There's only one move that we have to keep in mind, while with the other moves we have to calculate way more variations than moving back with the bishop, than capturing, what if we push, what if they go here, what if they play the queen, the rook. But here they basically only have one move really, which doesn't lose the game, or they could recapture here first. But yeah, we can just capture and the threat remains the same. So this is easy to calculate and to envision, to visualize. What did this accomplish for us? Well, we can play b5 and attack the bishop. We can potentially put the knight in the center because now this square is freed up because we moved and eliminated their pawn. So this immediately I can tell it has some benefits for our position. So that is why this is going to be the plan, and we are going to play this move and capture, and they recapture with the bishop. All right. It's black to move again because we just captured, they recaptured. So black to move. CCT, checks, no. Captures, no. Threats, well, this threat, we already calculated it. This threat, we already calculated it. And usually those types of moves, I will keep them in my mind because we already spent some energy on them. But we are of course not going to recalculate them because we know what's going to happen. If we attack the bishop, we already know that they can capture or go back. If we play the queen here, we already know that they could play queen b3, queen c2, or queen e2. What else do we have? We do have one threat. We do have pawn to b5, which is a very simple one-move threat. We attack the bishop goes back. In general, those one-move threats are not the right moves, but here we are opening up a square for our bishop. So very simple calculation is just attack, go back, develop the bishop. One thing we have to keep in mind is every time you move a pawn, you leave behind a weakness. So this is a little bit weak. It's already attacked as well, but it is defended and it is defendable in the future. So I don't really see a problem. So in this position, I'm going to remember this is my candidate move from the CCT. But if you only have one move from the CCT, it's quite likely that there is something else in the position as well. So now we are going to do the step 2 and step 3, which is the pawn structure check and the piece optimization check. So pawn structure check, what does that mean? We are just going to take a look at their pawn structure and take a look at our pawn structure. And from the pawn structure, oftentimes you can already determine the middle game plans. So first of all, white has a beautiful pawn structure, very solid, very strong, very flexible. And I'm saying all that because they haven't moved that many of their pawns. And the less pawns you move, the more flexible and the stronger your pawn structure is. So very good pawn structure. What is the plan for white? They could have a plan of pushing pawn to e4. And then they would be grabbing 2 squares in the center. That could be a potential plan for them, especially now that our pawn is gone. So in some line, they would like to push this and maybe break open here and create a bunch of exchanges, open up the position a little bit, or in some lines attack the knight, so the knight has to remaneuver, and then they have a little bit more attacking opportunity if the knight is gone, no longer defending. So that is the plan I identify for my opponent. What is the plan for black? I think one of our biggest plans is to try to strike back in the center and try to attack this d4 pawn with one of our pawns, because that is how we can eliminate their strongest pawn. For example, well, of course, this is just giving away a free pawn. But for example, if we play c5, they take, we can take, our knight is improving, the position is opening up a little bit, we are getting an active rook. And you can tell that this is already becoming a little bit better for black. Their amazing pawn structure has been somewhat destroyed. We improve the rook, we improve the knight. So from this position, I now have b5 and c5 already my 2 candidate moves. The third step, since we only have 2 moves, I am usually going to do the third step as well, and that is the piece optimization step. So I'm looking at all my pieces, so not my pawns, just my pieces, and thinking how can I optimize them. Well, this knight is already developed, and this bishop is doing a purpose with protection, so I'm going to let this be. You could of course think about bishop here as well, but I think these pieces have a purpose. This knight is a little bit passive, it is somewhat protecting this one, but that's basically already done by my bishop and my queen as well. So this knight is a little bit passive. The biggest problem I see is this bishop is basically not in the game, not at all. And it's probably never gonna open up here on this diagonal. So I have the opportunity to push this pawn, maybe pawn b6, or of course pawn b5, as we already calculated. And then we could potentially put the bishop here. Let's say we play this. So that also helps with piece optimization. What else could we potentially play? For example, this knight to d5. This is an improvement because our knight is moving forwards. They can trade the bishops. We can take this. Let's say they castle. And this position already looks a little bit more active for black, but also not really much going on. For example, if we trade, we basically reinforce their pawn structure still, and we just did a bunch of trades without any clear plan. You could play this, but of course there's not really any benefit. So how do I decide? I now have these candidate moves, c5, b5, and knight here. Those are the moves I'm considering. There are other things you could think about, but I'm gonna say these are, in my opinion, potentially the best moves. So how do you pick between them? That is usually the difficult part. Well, what I'm gonna say is that b5 accomplishes 2 goals. It helps us improve the bishop, and it also wins the tempo. So in general, I think the move b5 is very promising. The move knight to d5, as we calculated, it's not a bad move. It's probably among the best moves, but the ending position is a little bit drawish. c5 is an improvement for us, but it's also something we can still delay and play in the future once we have more support. So I am going to choose to play b5. Is this the ultimate best move? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty certain that this is one of the best moves in the position, and it also gives us an easy middle game plan, because now we can develop the bishop and we can protect this pawn. And now we are again in the middle game. Again, we need to find a new plan. Well, the good thing is, if you do this check very early on, you will usually start to see that many of the ideas you have will come back and they will help you for your future moves as well. Because honestly, nothing much has changed and we have already been thinking about this position. So of course, CCT, no checks, no captures, yes, we can immediately do this and attack the knight. They can also just move it. So I'm not going to do that. I don't really see any other immediate threats that we should play. So CCT not really giving us a result, but the pawn structure check and the piece optimization check are still in the back of my mind, and I can use them to find the best plan here. So I am still thinking about pushing pawn to c5, which would be incredibly good if it was not for the fact that we were losing this pawn. So immediately I already have a very simple middle game plan. I have to protect this pawn so I can push c5. That's one thing I'm thinking about. The second thing is, of course, the piece optimization strategy also told us that some pieces could be improved. For example, rook to c8 would probably also be a good move. But what I'm going to do here, of course, if you are playing rapid, you don't have time to think like we did for the previous example all the time. So sometimes you do have to speed up. So I am going to continue with the plan. We can just play pawn to a6, protect this pawn, and then, see, my opponent is playing the plan that I told you that was their best plan. And we do have to strike back in the center. So again, CCT, checks, captures, threats. This is a capture, but it's also losing a full piece. So yeah, we're not going to play that. Any immediate threats? I don't really see any, except again, attacking this knight and just having them move. Yeah, so CCT, not really doing much right now, but we already have our middle game plan that we determined. We want to fight back for the center. So moves I am thinking about here are especially this pawn push to c5. We can push, we can attack the center. If they take, we can take with the knight. We also attack their bishop. We open up the queen, plus we open up this bishop. Look at how beautiful the position is becoming for black. But of course they don't have to take. They could always push. They could always push this pawn. In which case we can take this with our pawn or even with our knight, because we have some backwards tricks as well. And then we have to go for some crazy line, probably like this. But it's a lot of calculation work. You can also, of course, just recapture with your pawn. That is fine. So capture, capture, and then eventually here, still, it is always going to be black who is improving his position. As you can see, we expanded, we destroyed their strong center, and we improved our pieces. So this is the type of calculation you need to do. If they take, I can already see, I usually calculate only 3 to 4 moves because that's the most crucial part and the part where you won't make mistakes. So I can see this is going to be an improvement. This would also be an improvement. What if they play this? Well, I can move my knight here, take, and still we have the pawns, we are attacking. Even if they try to trade, yeah, everything is solid. So we are able to just quite simply and quite easily now play a little bit faster because we already have the right middle game plan. And that is usually how I play. In the beginning, you have to look at your position, you have to do a lot of calculation, you have to think about pawn structures, piece optimization, but usually once you start seeing the plan, you can just basically keep going. I think this is a bit different. I didn't calculate what would happen here, but in general, nothing much is going to happen because now we just have two incredibly strong and well-placed knights here. We have more space on the queen side. Yeah, there is just a bunch going on, but also a lot of good things going on here for black. So once you have played a couple of moves, I think we are now 5 moves further into the future. Very important that you don't start playing on autopilot, because so much has changed. This position is completely different from the one at the beginning. So it is time to do a completely new check. CCT, pawn structure, and also improving the pieces. So if you want to think what you think is the best move here, go ahead, start thinking. I am going to do my check. CCT, checks, no checks. Captures, yes, we have one capture, which would be gaining a bishop in exchange for a knight. And we have a follow-up, I think, with attacking the queen, attacking this pawn. So it doesn't look terrible. They can play queen here, and we can maybe even attack the queen. So yeah, I think this already looks quite interesting. So what I will always do is I will calculate it precisely. If you do loose calculation, you will have to look at this again in the future. So we take, they take. The simplest move is always going to be a CCT follow-up, a check, a capture, or a threat. So this. So this was not a good plan for them. Maybe they can play queen a3. But then we can take, and we win a pawn. Okay. So I already know if I take, they have to recapture. If I play this, these moves don't work for them. But maybe they have queen here. I have to respond. And I'm basically still winning a pawn. So I have already decided now that from the CCT, I have a move, this, which wins us a pawn. Guaranteed, we always win a pawn. So that's very nice. That's promising. If you have a lot of time, you should calculate more than one move, because there might be something better. But this already looks quite amazing, and if you are low on time, go for this, trade, and gain a pawn. But sometimes a pawn is not enough to win the game. Okay, anything else from the CCT? I think this knight move might also be an interesting move, and because we are attacking the bishop, and also attacking this pawn. So we can do this. They have something, they have to respond, their bishop is under attack. And if they move back, let's say they try to protect, I think we can still take this, damage their structure, and probably attack their queen. And I think their queen is actually in quite some trouble, because if you see this, the queen is under attack, and the queen cannot go here, here, or here. It cannot go on any square on this file. So basically the queen has to go to this square, and I think we have quite a nice follow-up, which is a fork. And if they trade, we still have a fork. So I think I just found us a line that wins more than just a pawn. If we do this and they go back, they are losing. But the thing is, even if they go to another square, I think it's basically always the same. We take, and we can use any of our rooks to attack the queen. They're always in trouble. They have to go here, and then we do the fork. So from the CCT, I was already able to find a winning sequence. 1, this wins a pawn, and 2, this wins a piece. Since this was a lot of calculation and a lot of time, I am not going to do any of the other checks, but just for the video, I am going to say from the pawns, I can already see that this is weak for them, and these can also be attacked by my knights. So that would also have been the same conclusion from the pawn structure check. For black, I would say don't move any pawns in this position, because we still have a solid pawn structure. We don't really want to do anything. For the pieces, I would say probably some moves like this. Those would also be good moves, developing a rook. But I think this move is just going to win us the game. They go back here. We take this knight. They recapture. We attack their queen. I think we can do it with both rooks, but this rook is the most useless. This rook has some defense. And then we can... I think we can do it with both knights. It doesn't matter. Ah, they have an escaping square with the queen. That's funny. Of course, because if we move a knight, they have an escaping square. But now we can simply take the rook. And we are already up material. And then, of course, you would have to continue. You would have to keep going. Always calculate CCT first. Then if you don't find anything, again, look at the pawn structure, look at piece optimization. The pawn structure, again, has changed. Many more weaknesses. Also, the checks starting to look more interesting. We have simple checks. We have attacks on the rooks. We can attack here the queen. We can attack the pawn. Black is going to win this position regardless. And as long as we do the CCT check every single move, I think it's going to be easy to win this game. So I hope this will help you to find the best moves and also come up with a middle game plan.